Welcome back to another episode of Creators Anonymous, guys. Happy to have you here with us. Today, I am joined with Derek Diamond, a short film director or just a filmmaker in general. Has his own podcast. Big fan of wrestling. Uh, Derek, it's very nice to have you.
No, I appreciate you having me on. We were just talking, before we got started that even though I do my own podcast, I don't really get to have too many guest spots on shows. So it's almost like it's like that I don't know what to do with my hands kind of thing. But I appreciate the invite. This is really cool.
Yeah, no, very happy to have you. Like I was just telling you before we started, I did see the Parker Syndrome. I loved it. Like it was kind of this story about like this trauma, this generational trauma or family trauma, and I think we've all experienced something like that of just like these heightened expectations that's hard to live up to, and judgment being passed on you when you're just trying to live your life. But I did see it, I enjoyed it, and we'll jump into that. But Derek, I did want to ask you because we are a show about where our path takes us, in life, and I'm here to show people that there's no one right path to get to where you want to be or where you're kind of happy. Um, could you tell me a little bit about your background, like maybe education wise, and if you pursued filmmaking in school or if you went to school for something else or you just didn't go to college or higher education?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in a small town in Northwest Florida called Jay. Population was at the time, I believe, less than 500. So very small class that I was in. Sports were a big thing. I realized very quickly that I did not have any athletic skill whatsoever. So that avenue was not meant for me. And really, I didn't know what I wanted to do until my freshman year of college, and I was in student government association at the time, and I was just hanging out in our office. And my first year of college is wrapping up. I still have no clue what I'm going to do, and I find this brochure for what was at the time their digital video broadcasting program. And I was like, well, I grew up, loving movies and TV shows because I was an only child, so I had to find ways to entertain myself. So I did that through watching movies and shows, but I never really thought it would be anything that I could do. And I was looking at the different classes that my college offered, and I just kept going back to it and was thinking, okay, well, I can try this out for a semester. And if it doesn't work, then I have some elective credits, in the can. But after that first production class that I took, it was in a local PBS studio that we have here in Pensacola. And I knew after the first day that this is what I want to do, seeing, the cameras set up because we had our own student studio, and seeing the cameras set up on the teleprompter, soundboard and all of that, I just fell in love with being on a set. So I knew right then and there that that was what I wanted to do.
It's different, right? It's a little magical being on a set, just seeing all the moving parts that you wouldn't see otherwise and how everything comes to fruition. It's kind of this surreal feeling where you're like, oh, I'm part of the process now of that I loved. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
funny because like I have a very similar story where I was a freshman in college. I was actually a computer science major and I was doing coding. And I remember going to school for coding and being like, wow, I don't like this. I, I literally after the first semester, I was like, oh, I think I mixed up liking playing on computers to working on computers because I can't see myself doing this 9 to 5, you know.
Right.
And then I went to my school administrator and spoke to her, and she was like, film's a very, oversaturated industry. And I was like, well, that just means I gotta work harder. I gotta work harder than everyone else. But I'm happy you pursued what you actually like, you know. And from there to your first short film, uh, what did it look like? Were you working in a studio? Were you just doing, part-time? video stuff for like weddings, because like everyone has their own route that they take before fully diving into their first real project.
It's like you just dove into my brain and picked out what I was gonna say. Um, so it there were a lot of twists and turns to get to my first short film. Um, I graduated college in 2008, and by that point, I was, filming weddings as my own, freelance business, and I was doing quite well. So my thought was, why go, to college for another few years when I've got a decent paying job, because I was having like one, maybe sometimes two weddings a month, and was like, okay, well, I'm already making money, and I'd rather do that than go to school more. So I did that. That ultimately kind of fizzled out. And then I got a job with a local minor league baseball team here called the Pensacola Blue Wahoos. And I worked as a camera operator just strictly on game days. But then that evolved into a more permanent job. And what was originally going to be just a summer job for me turned out to be an 8-year career. I ended up getting promoted to a trainee where I would work more behind the scenes and then got promoted to assistant manager. So through all of that, film was still ultimately what I wanted to do. And I got to give credit to my friend Steve Wise, who was not just a friend, but he's also been a mentor of mine when it comes to filmmaking. He went to UCF's film school. I believe he was part of their first class they ever had, as far as UCF's film program goes. I worked on him, or worked on his short film Survey, which we filmed in the summer of 2017, and that was really what gave me the push to finally uh, make my first short.
And how was that? Like, was it kind of like nerve-wracking? Were you like anxious about the whole process, or were you or were you like a person that was like confident in, I know I'm gonna be able to nail this, or I know I'm gonna be able to like pull through? Because me personally, I suffer from anxiety, and when there's like a big change like that, or a big decision to make, I'll dilly-dally on it for a while.
No, I know exactly what you mean. I'm not as anxious as I used to be. I used to have really terrible social anxieties when I was in college, especially early on. That's one of the main reasons why I started my own podcast. But I I learned very quickly that when it comes to filmmaking, you've got to leave your ego at the door to a certain degree. And what I mean by that is try to surround yourself with people that are smarter than you and know more than you, and just become a sponge. Just absorb as much information as you can, because with the Parker syndrome, I didn't just write it, but I made the decision to direct it. There was a part of me that was thinking, well, I could get somebody else to do it that would probably do a better job than me, but this is a story I came up with and I wanted to see it through. So I made the decision that I want to direct it. So I surrounded myself with people that were more experienced than me, and they really helped me, get through. It was only a 2-day shoot, so it wasn't. They were two very full days, but looking back on it, it wasn't as nerve wracking as I initially thought it was. Um, there's there were some bumps along the way, but I think that happens with any film project. It's never going to go exactly the way you picture it. But it was a great learning experience for me.
Well, that's awesome. And it came with accolades, and I could say that like uh w it was very enjoyable to watch. And were you surprised when it got such good feedback, or were you like, I kind of knew it?
No, I was, I try not to have really any expectations going into things like, screenings or getting feedback, because if I have high expectations and they're like, "Oh, well, this is one of the worst things I've ever seen," or "This was terrible," I'm like, "Oh, man." But no, No, I really had no expectations going in, and the cool thing was, so we did a local screening of it in the summer of 2019, and we had, a pretty decent crowd show up, and the fact that it got such a positive response really kind of validated the whole thing for me. It was almost like someone had taken this 300-pound weight off my shoulders, because I was anxious to hear, the feedback, because I stood in the back of the room because I wanted to kind of feel the audience's reactions to certain moments throughout the film.
Well, it must have felt good. Honestly, I can only imagine that like it was a great feeling knowing that something that you made and you put your heart and soul into and all that effort actually received such great feedback and such a great response. And
Yeah, absolutely.
between the Parker syndrome and your newest, the feature, um like what was the time frame between those two films?
So we filmed the Parker Syndrome in December of 2018, and we filmed the feature in the summer of 2022. Now, the feature is a project that, it was an extremely personal project to me because it included elements of my own life. It's in short, it's a movie about making a movie, but it's about more than that. It's about, I feel, the emotion that goes into, us as filmmakers. We get told by, it might be family members or it might be friends, don't, when you think about doing something else that's maybe a little bit safer, that you might get more, steady income, not as crazy hours, things like that. But it takes a lot of courage to even make a film, because it takes a lot of work, as I'm sure you're aware of. There's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot of sacrifice, and it really evolved from the first draft of the script that I wrote. The first draft I wrote in January of 2020, and we all know what happened shortly after that with the pandemic. So things around the world were practically shut down. Now, I did work on a film set or two during the pandemic where it was a very, small crew. We all wore masks and, followed the proper protocols. But I never forgot about that idea. And through the pandemic, I reconnected with my now wife. That we got married in 2022, and I
Congratulations.
oh, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, we'll be celebrating our 2-year anniversary next month.
Nice.
But so we were talking, and I told her about, this the script that I had written, because she knew about the Parker syndrome and everything. But I told her about this other idea I had, and she's like, "Well, do you mind if I read the script?" So I printed out a copy, gave it to her, and she's like, "I really like the story, but I think the dialogue can use some work." And I was a little taken aback by that. I'm like, work in what way? And she said, "Well, you don't talk like normal people, and all the characters talk like you. So, do you mind if I help you out with the dialogue?" So we eventually added elements of our story, like kind of how we got together, because we were friends for years before we actually got together as a couple. And we incorporated elements of that in the feature. So it really became our story. And that's why it became a really special project to us.
That's awesome. I'm it's really nice to hear that you took your significant others, criticism and in such a good way. You guys ended up working together. I started the company that I have now with my fiance and we
Oh,
work
great.
together. Yeah, I spend like 23 hours a day with her. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have it any other way. And honestly, yeah, she's my biggest supporter. Whenever I've felt like it's too much or giving up, she's always there to be like, no, we can do it. Like, no, you just gotta stick with it or it's gonna turn out fine. And sometimes you need that person in your corner. Uh through it all, have you ever felt like, Because you were talking about certain family members or friends criticisms about like, don't you want like a steady paycheck, or don't you want something a little more secure? Has that thought ever crossed your mind?
Um, it has. Luckily, I do have a full-time job that it's not filmmaking, but I do have video and creative elements to it. I work in communications for the Catholic diocese that we have here in town. So I do everything from like running the social media to going out for photo shoots, shooting video. We actually have a podcast that we produce. So I still get that creative outlet while
Mm.
also having flexible work hours to where I still have time to work on like my personal projects. Like my wife's actually going to be directing her first short this summer that I'm producing, based on a script that she wrote towards the end of last year. So we're kind of you know knee deep in pre-production for that.
That's awesome though. Yeah, no. So okay, you do have that sort of safety net when it comes to having that job,
Right.
but then it does allow you to branch out creatively. I love that. I love to hear that. Too many times I've heard people talking about they work in an industry that they don't like, just to try to fuel their creative endeavors. And sometimes that's just how it has to be, but you're one of the lucky ones there. You're one
I
of the lucky
appreciate
ones.
that. And I wanted to get that across in the feature as well because um at the beginning of the movie, Matt, the main character, is doing just that. Like he wants to be a filmmaker. He went to film school, but he got, the steady 9 to 5 job that's, it makes decent money, good job security, but he's extremely unhappy with it. And that's a pretty pivotal point in the movie because I think all of us creatives have been there at one point or another where we're working some kind of job that it's like it sucks the soul right out of you. And you work so many hours that you're so mentally and physically drained that the last thing you want to do when you get home is spend a couple of hours, running a fine tooth comb through a script or editing something. Like you just want to lay on the couch and watch SpongeBob SquarePants for a couple of hours.
No, I feel that completely. I worked 3 years at a call center, and there was nothing worse. And I would work full time, then go to school, uh, for film like in the afternoon. So 9 to 5 call center, then I would go to school. And I have to say that by the time that I would get to school, that was the best part of my day. And then getting out from school and then like going home with my fiance, that was like the best part. It's the only thing that actually like kept me going through the motions until I graduated and everything. But now I work in, AV and live productions, doing, you know, camera, projector, sound, lighting setups and everything. Uh, I tell everyone that it's industry adjacent to what I want to do, um, but it's still within the realm of the same industry. And so I got semi lucky, not as lucky as you, but I'm somewhere there.
Oh, you sound like you're doing pretty good for yourself though. I do I don't really work in sports anymore, but I do sometimes miss the live production because it's like you don't 100% know what's going to happen and it's kind of exciting in that way. So it sounds like you're doing quite well for yourself though.
Thank you, thank you. That means a lot. And mentioning sports, you said you no longer work in sports, but you are a big wrestling fan,
I
correct?
am, yeah.
Okay. And what is your favorite promotion? Your favorite wrestling promotion? Is it WWE? Yeah, they change. Oh yeah, WWE. There's some other ones. I'm not versed in wrestling. I will admit, I'm not gonna fake it.
Gotcha. Okay. Um, as far as currently, yeah, I would say the WWE. So I got introduced to wrestling by my uncle when I was at the age of 12. So this was early 1998. And it was something that, he thought that I would be interested in, because he grew up watching it, back in the late 70s and into the 80s with, like Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and all those great talkers back then. And he thought it would be something that I was interested in. And from the first time I watched it, I was hooked. And there's something about, and I know a lot of people will criticize it because it's quote unquote fake. And yet I look at it as, it's predetermined, but there's nothing fake about what they do when they put themselves at risk for serious injury, and those have happened before. So I don't look at it as fake. I look at it as, almost like a type of theater in a way, just a very physical kind of theater. But it's provided me with a lot of fun memories, from getting to go to WrestleMania in 2008 in Orlando was really cool. I even took a friend of mine a few years ago to a show that WWE was doing here in town, and we had a blast doing that. But yeah, of all time and currently, I would say the WWE would be my favorite.
Nice. Yeah, I agree with you. You know, predetermined, yes. Fake, no. Those wrestlers are a different breed of athlete because not only do you have to be athletic, you are willingly putting yourself in danger. You are willingly because uh like becoming injured, you know that you're going to go into a match and you're going to get hurt because the pain is real,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do they do it a little safer? I understand that they do, but you're still going to feel some pain. So they're acrobats, fighters, and entertainers all like rolled up into one because the athletic shape that they have to be in to put on some of those fights and do some of the moves that they do and some of the stunts that they do is unreal, and
Mm-hmm.
they really put their bodies through how to give the viewer that amount of entertainment.
And I will give a shout out to my friend Joey Image. He's actually a retired pro wrestler based out of New Jersey. He recently, had to have neck surgery just because of the wear and tear that, his career put on his body. So I think it was last year that he had neck surgery. So yeah, it's real wear and tear, and I have nothing but respect for what they do.
No, and like I said, I'm not gonna pretend like I know a whole lot, but I do know that I respect the craft, I respect the art form, and they're crazy, crazy athletes, you know.
They are, that they are.
What is your favorite moment in like, is there like a moment in wrestling history that like you go back to sometimes and you reminisce about, or there a moment that made you stand up out of your seat, um, just in awe or in excitement?
There's a couple. So when I was at WrestleMania in Orlando back in 2008, it was, at the time, it was Ric Flair's retirement match. Now, he had been inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame the night before, and a friend of mine, we went to go see that as well. And it was just an emotional 2 days because, that, say what you will about him, the man has put a lot of his time, his energy, and his passion into creating one of the greatest wrestling characters of all time. And getting to see him honored like that was pretty emotional. Like, it was a sad and a happy memory at the same time. But the one that I think I always go back to most was in the year 2000. My parents took me to Mobile, Alabama to see a wrestling show. It was a WWE or WWF at the time, and The Rock was champion. And I remember when his music hit, the crowd just erupted to the point that you could barely hear his entrance music. It was insane. Like, that man has such, and even still to this day, he's back for a small run now, and he hasn't lost a step. It's like anytime he works a crowd, he has them right in the palm of his hands. There's
Yeah, the
just that
deafening
natural charisma that
cheers.
he has. Yeah. Yeah, so that's the one that I always go back to.
Yeah, I know that Ric Flair is a very positive person, you know. I've heard and I've seen some videos with him where he's done interviews, and he's all about that positivity. He's all about pursuing your dreams and building people up. And I can honestly say that it's refreshing when you hear someone like in his position, because he's had such a monumental like career, that it's nice to see he's so humble about it. And you don't get that a lot. Like a lot of people in a lifelong career, they're not as humble as you would want them to. That's why they're like, never meet your hero, because sometimes you place people on a pedestal, but it can never really live up to your expectations, because at the end of the day, they're just people. But I saw some things with him. I thought they were really nice. I loved what he was talking about, and how it was about like following your dreams. And that's what I try to push as well, because um some people might be tough on themselves. They might say that they're not making the right steps or moves. But it's like, as long as you're following your dream and you're trying to get and pursue where you want to be, there's no one right path. There's twisting and winding roads, and there's going to be hardships, and there's going to be easy moments and some highs and lows. But if you just keep pursuing that and you keep going towards your dream, like, I have no doubt that, you're going to get to somewhere where you're happy or content or ecstatic to be at.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think, with social media these days, there's so much negativity. No matter what the topic is, it seems like there's always people out there that are wanting to bring you down or only talk about negative things. So I agree with you that it's nice to see, something positive and inspirational come from somebody. But I do actually, if you don't mind, I do have a personal Ric Flair story to
Go
share.
for it. Yes, I would
So
love it.
there's a we have a local Comic Con style convention here in town called Pensacon. It happens every February, and I believe it was back in 2017. Ric Flair was announced as a guest. So I'm like, okay, if I meet one person at this convention, it's got to be Ric Flair. So of course, you go in the room in the base center where they keep or where they put all the celebrities, at their tables and whatnot, where you can go in and get autographs and whatnot. And there's people going woo all weekend long because people love Ric Flair. So I finally decided, okay, the line's not terribly long, so this is going to be my moment. And it gets to my turn, and he turns and looks at me after he's finished, taking the photo with the person in front of me, and he looks at me and he starts doing his strut because he's standing in front of the table, and I freeze because I'm so starstruck by meeting Ric Flair. But I eventually shake it off and got, my photo with him and everything. I always love seeing it pop up on my Facebook memories every year because that was one of my favorite, celebrity meetups was meeting Ric Flair.
That's great. You were starstruck.
I
You
was, yeah. It
it
doesn't happen very often, but on that day it did.
No, no, I feel you, because I've, doing live productions, I've come across some people that I'm like, oh wow, yeah, no, they're a pretty big name. And nothing. But then there was this one time where I was in an elevator, and Conan O'Brien walks in, and I'm in, I have my work shirt on, I have to be professional. All I want to do, all that's popping through my head is like, oh my God, I want a picture. Uh, and all that came out was like nothing. I just stared around at like coworkers. I was like, is that like Conan O'Brien? But like, we're just mouthing it to each other. And he is a lot taller than I thought he was gonna be in person.
Yeah,
So
he's
he's
a
like
tall
six
dude.
four. And I'm okay, so there's a little controversy here. I say I'm 5'4", and my fiance says I'm 5'2". I'm 5'4". But so he's a whole foot taller than me. And I'm just looking him up and down. I'm completely silent. um he walks out of the elevator, and he goes, take care, fellas, and he just walks off. And I was like, the doors close, and I just turned to everyone. I'm like, holy crap, that was Conan O'Brien. And, and then the whole day, all I could think of was like, I didn't say a single word to Conan O'Brien, and we were in an elevator together for 10 floors, not a single thing. Like
Did
if I
that feel
could go
like the
back and
longest 10 floors of your life?
yes, because and we all went silent in the elevator. Um, it was me and three other coworkers, and what had happened, we were talking about nothing crazy. We were talking about like zip up sweaters, how it's hard to find a good zip up sweater these days, like something very, very regular. And the doors open and we see him and he walks in and we all just went silent, just, just silent. And now if I could go back and I would at least say like hi, I would at least greet him
Right.
in the moment. It's tough, but like then you got other people and you're just like, ah, yeah, that, you know, they're cool.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. No, it's what I have to keep telling myself is, it's a cliche saying, but they're just people like you and I. They just happen to be, featured in some of our favorite movies or shows.
No, I completely agree. They're just people, they're just regular people that just so happen to be on TV, or
And
doing
in my
comedy
experience
shows.
too, I think it's refreshing to them if they run into somebody that just talks to them like a normal person. Because you got to think, especially some of those, A-list talent, how often do they get that?
No, and I've met people who are in those positions, and I've always spoken to them just like just an acquaintance or like, just a regular person. And you never think that you're gonna swallow your tongue, but it's like that one person that is on your list comes by and boom, speechless.
Hmm.
Like exactly what happened with you and Ric Flair. You never thought, that it was gonna happen, but your body loses control.
Yeah, it does. But it's, I'm sure with the Conan O'Brien moment, it's one of those things that, you look back on it and you're like, yeah, it's still pretty cool.
No, the first thing I did was text my fiance. I'm like, oh my God, I was in an elevator with Conan O'Brien. He's a giant, you know? That's the first thing I told her. But yeah, no, it was still a very cool moment, despite everything. Uh, it's a good story to tell. And it sometimes feels a little surreal even telling it because it happened within the span of just like an elevator ride and it
Right.
stuck with me. But Derek, so we spoke about the Parker syndrome. I want to get back to that a little bit.
Okay.
Uh, do you have any favorite moments that's stuck with you? I know you said that was a 2-day shoot, but it was a long 2-day shoot. Was there anything that you took away from that? Maybe a lesson about, since it was your directorial debut, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. So is there like anything that you look back on, you go, maybe I'll try something else, or now this doesn't work, and because I can only imagine that it was a learning experience for you.
The biggest lesson I took away was, and this is something that has kind of plagued me throughout most of my adult life, but be more confident. Be more confident that, this is your vision. While you can still, collaborate and take feedback, you ultimately, like as the director, you are the gatekeeper. You are the one that has to make the final decision, and you have to be confident in that. And with the Parker syndrome, I was kind of figuring it out as I went along, and I did, as I mentioned, I had a lot of people that helped me, but it was also one of those things that I had to experience it for myself to see what it was like to be a director. And it was really learning how to deal with people, and because everybody has their own like subtly different communication style, like as I'm sure you've learned with doing the podcast, some people communicate very differently than others might. So little things like that are the biggest takeaways that I learned. And I also think, you can never be too prepared for any type of shoot that you do, whether it's film or, in your case, live production or anything like that. So there were some things like, compiling the shot list and really communicating with um, certain members of the crew that I could have done farther in advance than what I actually did. So I think being more prepared in the pre-production side of things was the biggest thing I learned from the Parker syndrome.
No, and I think being prepared is probably the most important thing in my book. You can't be prepared for everything, you know,
Mhm.
but the more you sit down and kind of ponder, what situations could arise and what you can do to solve it beforehand and being proactive about it, I agree. It's super important. It's going to make it a much easier shoot. But no, yeah, I agree. The confidence is super important. You can't know everything, but as long as you're confident in what you do know, I think that you're you're pretty close to success.
Mhm.
And how long did it take you to write like the Parker syndrome? Like was it a thing where you sat down and you said I'm gonna write a script, or was it a thing where after work you would throw in a page or two, or how did that go?
So this is another one of those stories that take a lot of twists and turns to get to ultimately where it did. When I graduated college back in '08, I knew I wanted to make something, but I didn't know what, but I wanted to try to make some kind of movie. So I had just little Canon camcorder and I'm like, okay, I want to make a movie of some sort. So at the time I had met a couple of new friends, and through friends that they had and friends that I had, we kind of came up with this idea that was a different version of the Parker syndrome than what we filmed back in 2018. It was a little more, what was longer, and there were more characters that were featured. And I knew that to make my first film, I thought that it would be a good idea to take that story and kind of modify it to fit the confines of a short film. And it's something that I'm familiar with, so I'm not going in completely blind. So one day I was sitting around and I watched that original version of the movie, and I'm thinking, well, if I made this today, I would do it way differently. And then I thought, wait a minute, I know people that can do this. I know actors, I know a great cinematographer, I know great producers. So why don't I do it? So then I started dialing the story down, and through Steve Wise, who I mentioned earlier, really bounced ideas off of him on how to condense it down, and that's ultimately how um, the final version of the script was done. I actually finished the final draft of the script at a Waffle House down the road from my house at 12:30 in the morning.
As as all the best stories finish at
Hey,
a Waffle House.
yeah, absolutely. No, that's what's great about Waffle House is that the food's delicious and they're open 24 hours a day. And sometimes when you work crazy hours, as I'm sure you know, you just got to fit in the work when you can. So, at the time I was working in baseball stills, so the hours were so crazy that sometimes it would be 10 or 10:30 at night and I would go home and have the motivation to write a page or two or send a different draft off and get some notes on it, and then when I have time a few days later, uh, get back to tweaking it. So it was a very long process, but I I'm very happy with how it turned out.
Yeah, and the endless amount of coffee at Waffle House must help as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, I I've found it that sometimes it's difficult to know when your script is done. Did you have that issue? Did you have where you kept reading it and then you would go, well, now I gotta revise this, and now this doesn't feel like it climaxes to this area, and did you find yourself in a bit of a loop sometimes where you just had to keep doing revisions?
I think the it was around 7 or 8 was around the final number of revisions that I did. Mostly because I've learned that I'm not very good at coming up with endings. I can come up with beginnings in the middle all day long, but it's finding the right moment to resolve things. And then, as the challenges are with a short film, sometimes you want to conclude the story while at the same time leaving things kind of open ended for the audience to be like, okay, well, maybe this happened or maybe that happened, and leave them wanting a little bit more. So the ending was something that I really kind of, you know, beat myself over the head with for a while. And then it just randomly hit me one day that, and it's people can watch it on YouTube, because it's been available for a while. But I really wanted Emma, the main character, to kind of take control of her life because she was in this toxic relationship. She had these, you know, horrible family issues, but I wanted her to be the one because she was the main character to kind of have this, you know, I'm going to have to be the proactive one to get everything back on track.
Yeah,
So
no,
that was ultimately where doing that in the right way was the biggest issue that I had.
no, it's so funny that you mentioned it too. I was going to talk to you about it. I actually loved how you left the ending kind of open to interpretation from the viewer because they go in to have this big, possibly emotional conversation with their parents, but you don't know where it goes. You don't know if it goes well, if it goes badly, if it goes completely ballistic. But I liked that you left it open for interpretation, and how that made me feel was it's open for interpretation because I have to have that conversation with family, or I have to have that conversation with my loved ones. It's like the ending is kind of breaking that fourth wall towards our lives because it's so relatable. And but yeah, no, I loved how the ending was this open-ended, up for interpretation situation. Because at the end of the day, if you did continue through with it, does it end on a good note? Does it end on a bad note? Well, you just ended it on like a neutral note. And I think that's I honestly feel like it was such a good decision and uh good artistic insight on your side.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And it, it was a little emotional making that story as well, because not only did it remind me of, the fun times that I had with my friends making the original version of it, but then the new friends I made through making this new one. But kind of the inspiration behind it was also, growing up in a small town, a lot of people my age or even older or sometimes younger, there are a lot of, like local businesses, whether it's, farming or running some kind of store. It's almost kind of assumed that the children are going to follow in their footsteps and keep the, family business tradition alive. Well, what if the the child doesn't want to do that? What if they want to make their own path? Sometimes you get supportive parents, and as you see in the Parker syndrome, sometimes you don't.
Yeah, facts. And that's real life. Sometimes you get supporters, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you get people who are trying to work against you and what you want. But yeah, that's the reality of it. And Derek, I know that you have another podcast that you host, and it's Nerd Cave Retro, and you have
Mm-hmm.
another one, the Derek Diamond Experience.
Mm-hmm.
So like you said, you don't get to be the guest very often. You're usually the host, and it says that you do like retro video games.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to break it down 2, what is your favorite retro video game?
Oh,
Do you
easily
have
it's
a favorite?
oh, I do. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So without a doubt, it's The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past for the Super Nintendo. Are you a
Okay.
Zelda fan?
I am a Zelda fan. I am
Okay,
more of an
perfect.
Ocarina of Time fan, but yes, I
I
love
won't
both.
argue that. I won't argue that. It's Ocarina of Time is it's in my top 3 or 4. Um, the thing with Link to the Past is I put so many hours into it. I loved the Super Nintendo. It's my favorite console of all time. My other outlet for entertainment, because I'm an only child, besides movies and shows, was video games. And Legend of Zelda, the original one for the NES, is one of the first video games I ever played. And that style of gameplay really stuck with me. So much so that whenever I got a Super Nintendo and The Legend of Zelda Link to the Past came out, it was a no brainer. And I just put so many hours into that. And I've been a diehard Zelda fan ever since. I actually, growing up, I never thought that I would get a tattoo. But several years ago, I got the Hylian shield and the Master Sword combo tattooed on the back of my right calf. Because I'm like, if
That's
I get a
awesome.
tattoo, it's going to be a Zelda one.
And I'm a big supporter of that. Uh I am a supporter of getting your fandoms tattooed on you, getting your your favorite games, shows. I have a tattoo of I don't know if you can see it. It's the White Lotus Pie showpiece from Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's my favorite
Okay,
animated
sweet.
series of all time. So I'm a big supporter of that. I would have to say that my favorite Zelda game is, Ocarina of Time, because Nintendo 64 was my favorite console as a child. It's the first one of the first consoles my mom bought us, me and my two other brothers, when we were kids. But that's my favorite Zelda game. My favorite retro game is Mario 64. Uh, and I was obsessed with that game. I played it every day after school. I no life that game to a point to a point that like the buttons on the controller were like worn out, you know. Uh
Right.
I'm sorry about the squeaks. My dog has his toy and he wants to be part of the podcast.
Oh, dogs are to me should always be welcome on a podcast. I've got a chocolate lab, so
Oh, okay.
if she were in here, she'd probably be telling me to pet her or something because she
Yeah,
loves attention.
he can't stay still long enough to be on a podcast though. He would be a terrible host.
Or depending on what kind of podcast he'd want to do, he could excel at it.
He
Who
could. You know
knows?
what? He could. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Just because
Yeah,
he runs around all crazy doesn't mean that he would be terrible at a podcast. Stick a
true.
GoPro on him, you know? Who knows? He might do the best podcast ever.
But yeah, Mario 64 to me it's one of the most important video games of all time because there was a weird period between the 16-bit and the 64-bit. Like graphically, it may not look as good because a lot of games from that era, the graphics don't hold up, but to me the gameplay still absolutely holds up. And you play games like Mario Galaxy and Mario Odyssey, and you can easily see the blueprint from Mario 64 and in a lot of other 3D platforming games as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. And there's a reason that it's, withstood withstood time itself. Like there's so many fans. There's still people who are speed running it to this day, you know. But I love the game. I love N64. I think I've always been a bigger fan of like Nintendo games than I have for Xbox or
Same.
PlayStation. But now I'm like strictly like PC gamer, It's just a lot easier for me.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that totally makes sense.
yeah. But um Derek, I really do want to thank you about for coming up on to the show today. I've had a great conversation with you. If you could give, one message to the viewers about, you know, how to pursue or just keep going forward, what would it be?
Uh That's a good question.
Yeah,
As far
I know
as
I'm
far as
putting you on the spot.
yeah, yeah, no, no worries. And it's weird because I'm usually on the other side of this. So, and I never think like, oh, what would I say? But no, I think to keep pushing forward is always have the end goal in mind, but also be adaptable that or have the realistic knowledge that you may have to take a detour or two. And yeah, the destination may not be exactly what you picture, but more often than not, you learn a lot of valuable lessons along the way. That, and to go back to what I was saying earlier, find people that know more than you and just learn from them as best you can, because it's going to make you a better filmmaker.
Perfect. I couldn't have said it better myself. Honestly, I fully agree. And, Derek, thank you so much. You guys keep pushing forward. Like Derek said, have the end goal in mind. Find your path, change your path, adapt to a new path, whatever it may be. Follow your dreams. Um, follow your happiness, be happy in life, take care of yourself, put yourself first sometimes, care for your mental health, you know, and just try your hardest to pursue what you feel is right in your heart. Because honestly, your happiness has to come first sometimes. I know that
Mm-hmm.
sometimes you try to martyrize yourself in certain ways, but your happiness has to come first sometimes. But Derek, thank you for coming on. Guys, check out Nerd Cave Retro, the Derek Diamond Experience. Check out the Parker Syndrome. Check out the feature if you have it showing somewhere near you, or if there's I'm gonna go ahead and put it in the description below for whatever showings are in the future. Um, and I'm
And
going to link all of Derek's socials down below so you guys can give him a follow. Derek,
perfect.
do you have something
Real
about the feature that you
Yeah,
would love
real
to?
real
Yeah,
quick. So I mentioned earlier that my wife Samantha is actually going to be directing her first short later this summer, and we do have, if anybody lives in the Gulf Coast area, we are going to be doing auditions in April. We also have a GoFundMe up for trying to help raise funds to, be able to pay the cast and crew and cover, costs for renting locations and whatnot. uh, the best place to find all the information is go to facebook.com/plain Jane movie, and really everything will be there. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
perfect. And I'll go ahead and I'll link the GoFundMe below in the description. As well as the site. And so the GoFundMe, your socials, your other podcasts, they'll all be linked below. Guys, give them a follow. I'm really happy you guys came on this journey and on this podcast to just see us talk and just kind of reminisce about experiences. You guys have been great. Love you guys. Have a great night.